Hello and welcome to the Morning Skate Podcast. I am Matt Moody, running a solo episode for Thursday, March 22nd. Thursday's 10 game slate is a pretty good one. So before we head into things, we'll just mention DJ is exceptionally busy. And rather than, try and cobble something up, I figured I've been paying attention. I can talk about these games. So we are going to do just that. Um, So before we dive into the 10 games, let's just recap Tuesday night. If you are in the morning skate madness, thank you for joining. But JR Day is your last chance at the listeners taking home the grand total of the $80 prize pool. Yeah, that's right. Myself, Doug, and DJ, the three morning skate crew members, are in the final four along with JR. So some really, really tight finishes. I know for DJ and Doug especially, I think they were rather close. I don't remember JR's score. I think he had a pretty good night though. And then I took out Jay Willie pretty easily, so I'm feeling good coming into this one. Let me just say, I'm coming for that pot. I did not expect the bracket to work out so perfectly that all three of Doug, DJ, and I would step up. But it's certainly been two of our better days in the group me as well. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're up there. So if you're not a part of the group me yet, join it. We're always talking about good stuff. I know Travis, who was on our podcast on Tuesday, he took down, I think, fourth in the big like $100 tournament for I think like 1,000 or 1,500. So that was really cool to see. Obviously had a great show. You know, I think we all regret Kari Lettinen. I certainly was not a big fan, but you know, one of those things where uh, goalie as the day goes, normally guys like Kari Lettinen kind of fall off of your radar. So hopefully no one else got too badly burned by that. And yeah, so Tuesday was fun. The morning skate madness is heating up down to the final four on Thursday. So be sure to check out the group meet if you're looking for the links to the two matchups. Again, I face JR and Doug and DJ square off for the final four. So the 10 games here, we have Tampa at the Islanders, the Rangers at Philadelphia, Arizona at Carolina, Florida at Columbus, Edmonton at Ottawa, Washington at Detroit, Toronto at Nashville, Vancouver at Chicago, Los Angeles at Colorado, and Vegas at San Jose. So we've only got one back to back on this slate right here. The Arizona Coyotes on the road after being in Buffalo Wednesday night, beating them in the Rasmus Dahlin Bowl. So the Sabres won that one by losing 4-1. Now sit in sole possession of last place in the NHL, which is it's pretty good. It feels good, let me tell you. So Carolina though just got shelled by Edmonton, so it's really hard to trust them at all going forward, really. So um, not as I'm not that interested in any spots solely as schedule plays. I think this time of year that certainly becomes a thing where either a team is just out of it and you can tell that they're already resting guys, which probably won't happen for the teams that are out of it, but more so for the teams that have clinched playoff spots. We might be seeing that for a team like Boston currently. Like Torrey Krug missed on Wednesday night, and we're not really sure what the injury was, but guessing it was something nagging, and that's kind of why he's out. They have a few other guys out too, so they're probably not rushing anyone back, having just clinched. But obviously, they're not on the slate. Tampa seems to be going balls to the wall. Vegas, no real issues there. Nashville hasn't rested anyone lately, so could see that. But as far as these other teams go, it should be full guns ablazing in terms of if a guy is available to play, they will play. So starting out game by game, Tampa at the Islanders, the Lightning. That first line of Kucherov, Stamkos, and JT Miller stayed intact last game. It seemed as if, going down 3-1 to the Maple Leafs, might have even been 3-0. I don't quite recall. You might have thought that they would have jumbled those lines up a little bit. That did not happen. They stayed together. Kucherov ended up having a nice little night. I think 5.5 points. Not great for 8K, but it's pretty solid. Definitely did not kill you if you played him. So it was interesting to see that Kucherov did only play 15 minutes. I couldn't tell you if there was some minor injury or something like that, or maybe they were just killing penalties because he's not one of their penalty killers. But I have no problem going back to that well. They are on the road against the Islanders, which is a little bit, it makes them, I think it takes them from like the elite must play territory to more of like they're a nice spend if you can get there. But it's, I would expect the Lightning to play much better at home, obviously. And the Islanders, give them a ton of crap for what they did to begin the season, or at least begin the 2018 part of the season. But they've been pretty solid in terms of goals against lately, having just stifled the Pittsburgh Penguins. They had a couple rough games against Washington, but those seem to be more goaltender related than actual like bad defensive play. And if you look at their numbers holistically, they're pretty good right now. They're not great, but they're not exactly the same Islanders team that was getting run out of the building on a nightly basis. Johnny Boychuk being back in the lineup probably helps that. And, I think this Tampa spot's an interesting one, but I'm not that interested just because they are super expensive. I think there are more intriguing spots. And if all else fails, I'm kind of seeing a bit less value than before and kind of focusing more on this mid tier of players. You're not getting value with JT Miller or Kucherov or Stamkos. Hedman is really close to Brent Burns territory price wise. So I don't really see this being, a great spot to target for Tampa, especially in cash games. On the Islanders side, though, you could convince me about someone like Anders Lee or Josh Bailey playing alongside Tavares in the mid fives. I think that's a great price. They're obviously on the power play together as well. I think Lee is the cash guy there. You would expect him, and he does. He has the better shot floor between him and Bailey, and he's shown that over and over again this season. So I have some interest there. A main guy that I'm considering for just any format is Ryan Pulock. He's fallen down to 4,200. Like, he's just been really solid lately. The role is very consistent there. He's playing that second power play, but he's also getting a lot of nice five or like non 5-on-5 ice time. Like 5-on-3s, he's out there. He had an empty net assist the other day. So I think that Ryan Pulock is very much in play at only 4,200. He's put up the rate stats to show why that is. If you sort by iCourse 360 over the last 20 games, he is right up, um, just I think 54th over the last 20 games. And for a defenseman, there are very few defensemen that come in ahead of him on that list. Let's see: Krug, Burns, Hamilton, Seth Jones. And yeah, that's it. So you can see, without a number of guys ahead of him, like, he's been one of the best defensemen in terms of firing shots on net or at the net. And with his shot and with his usage and with his price, I certainly have no problems going with it. So I think that's my favorite spot in this game just because he's such a nice value and obviously got to represent as JR and I are facing off for the title of the aptly named Pulock division. So let's move to Philadelphia at home against the New York Rangers. I peeked at the Vegas lines, and Philly is a minus 220 favorite in this one. That's not necessarily a surprise. Like, I think anyone could tell you that Philly is a much better team than the Rangers at this point. But to see a minus 220 line on this game, I think it actually was a little bit surprising to me. I would have expected 175 maybe. So that tells me something right away. And I know what the sim's going to tell me. The sim's going to tell me about Shane Gostisbehere. He's jumped up in price a little bit back to 6,100. I don't have much of an issue paying that price in this matchup. In fact, I think if you asked me between, a Barry, Carlson, Gostisbehere, um, Ellis, Subban, Yandel, like that's kind of the price range that he fits in. I think he's certainly the top play there. I am definitely looking to get up the burns before I get to, before I save that $1,000 on Gostisbehere. But you just can't argue with what Gostisbehere's done in terms of his blocks, playing along Provorov. The minutes are sky high. Power play just excellent. So I think Gostisbehere is one of the top defensive options here. And then similarly, like we have a guy like Claude Giroux who has just been putting up big games night after night for this Philly team. The shots have cooled off a bit as of late, which has me a bit concerned. But I think if you really like Philly in this matchup, all their offense flows through Giroux, and his price is very fair. He hasn't really been priced up to the level of some of these other elite wings, and Giroux has as many points as just about anyone in the NHL outside of the Kucherov class. So 87 points on the season so far, like that's six more than Ovi. Um, Guys like Panarin and Arvidsson, who are much more expensive, don't even come close to that mark. So I think that you could really get some nice value with Giroux there at only 6,500 in pretty much the nuts matchup. Um, Similarly, Couturier always is a little bit too expensive for me, but I think in tournaments, if you're playing a tournament team, I have no issue with Couturier and Giroux because I think they are among the top two-man stacks on the slate, and some of the ones that might be a little bit better also cost you a solid 1,000 to 2,000 more than those two combined. And lastly, Travis Konechny at 5,100 is a nice little a third wheel to that line, and also plays second power play time. So he has his, I think he's cash viable actually at 5,100. He has the numbers. He's been playing a pretty decent amount of minutes, um, but he's not a core play for me at all. But I do think he's viable in any format. I'm not really looking too much at these depth guys for Philly. Like, I don't think Voracek is a depth guy at all. Um, Simmons, 5,200. It's only 400 more than when I thought he was a great play just a few games ago. So I think that's definitely doable. Um, so yeah, I think Simmons over Konechny actually makes sense if I can reason while I talk here. But um, certainly, I think there's a lot of good ways to go in this game. And then lastly, if you're looking for value, I mean, it's not pretty, but Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom are playing, about 15 to 16 minutes for each of them and are super duper cheap. So, power play 2 as well, if I didn't mention that. So, I think this is the matchup where you can get away with playing a couple of guys who don't have great rate stats, but for 7,200 combined, they play pretty much all of their minutes together, and they should get upwards of 15 to 16 minutes. So if you pick up even one goal and a few shots for each of them, like you are absolutely smashing value, and obviously a multi-point game, gives you a huge leg up on the competition, who I don't think will have nearly as strong values as they provide. So let's go. Ranger side, I guess kind of have to mention Mika Zibanejad because I've been all over him for the last, I think, week and a half now ish, and of course that coincides with just a crazy game logs run from him. So I've been fortunate enough to have played him in just about every one of his last 5 games. But yeah, we're looking at 5.5, 8, 11, 7.5, 6 for his DK output. Last game, he had a goal on 5 shots and a block shot, played 20 minutes of ice time. His price barely moved. Like, come on. I don't know what he has to do to get above 6,000. But if you just look at this objectively, like on this slate, he is Uh, well, actually, I'm not going to count through all the players who are and aren't on the slate. He's somewhere around the top 10, though, in terms of players on the slate in iCourse per 60. Over the last 20 games, he ranks 16th in the entire NHL. It's north of 20. Like, it is just outstanding the way that he's firing the puck on net. We know he's super talented. He has a great shot. He's playing a ton of minutes in all situations. And there's really just no reason not to play him, in my opinion. Like, yeah, the matchup does kind of suck, but uh, I think matchups against Carolina, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Columbus all kind of sucked too. And he's smashed through all of them. So I don't really have any hesitations about playing Zibanejad. I don't think he's a lock, but I think if you're in this range, he should be the guy that you are at least starting on and finding a reason not to play because he's just been that good lately. Um, Anyone else? No, not really. Like Neil Pionk is still there, but he's been priced up to 4,100 on that power play with Zibanejad. And I think that a guy like Pollock is a better option. So let's go to Carolina at Arizona. As I alluded to, Arizona on a back to back, the only team in such a situation here. But I don't, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable targeting this Carolina squad like really at all. Um, so I'm going to be very hesitant to play any of these guys. I think if you're looking for one name to keep an eye on, it's Valentin Zykov. If you were unsure of like who he was before Tuesday's slate, one, you should have listened to Tuesday's pod because we talked about him a little bit. But also, um, he well, two, I guess I'll actually explain who he is because he leads the AHL currently with 32 goals on the season. Leads them by I think a few goals still, even though he's for a few days. But he's done it on like a 28% shooting percentage. He's certainly not a guy who showed any sort of volume shot rate in the AHL. I think he was at like 1.75 shots per game. So yeah, he's good. He could keep up his scoring touch. But what makes him, I think, a reasonable play on this slate is that he is centering pretty juicy line. I just want to pull it up first before I. And Zykov is playing between Aho and Teravainen. I think Aho is the center there, so that's a very, very good line for a guy like Zykov to be on. So 2,800, I have no issues with the play. He did play power play time, second unit last game as well, so no issues there. But I do have hesitations on like his actual, I guess, DFS output going forward once he's priced to his role. But for now, I think he's more than reasonable against an Arizona team that has been playing pretty well, but certainly shouldn't be a team that you fade a guy at such a great price because he doesn't honestly have to do that much to pay off value. And he's in one of the best spots of any probably sub 4K guy in the slate, let alone a guy who's 2,800. So let's, yeah, I mean, Arizona, no, just no for me. I know Carolina just gave up 7 goals, but are you really going to pay 4.5 for Richard Panik? I don't think so. A guy like Ekman Larson got the price jump to 5,200. So I think you're pretty safe to fade this side. If someone wants to yell at me and say, "Oh, Christian Fischer playing with Dylan Strome is a great play at 3,000," like I don't think you're right. So let's go to Florida at Columbus. Let me just Christian Fischer is like one of the better shot rate guys on Arizona, so I know he's perked up a few years here and there before. But let's go to Florida at Columbus. Artemi Panarin, almost. I mean, realistically, he probably should have broken the slate on Tuesday. He put up 15 DraftKings points, had three goals, obviously a hat trick, and an assist against the New York Rangers. But he just wasn't really that owned. it was a big 11-game slate, but I couldn't tell you. Like, I thought he was a great play. I did make a GPP team solely to roster him and Atkinson, which definitely worked out. Had a pretty nice night, but nothing too crazy there. But yeah, 15 points out of Panarin last game. Now they come home to face a Florida team that I don't think they've been all that great. Like, yeah, they just they had a pretty good game against Ottawa, but before that, they were giving up chances in bundles. Um, Columbus ranks up in the top 5 in terms of expected goals on this slate, looking at the last 10 games with the slight recency weighting. So I certainly am more than willing to go right back to the Panarin well here. He's 7,200, which is not the 6,500 that he was last game, but I have a feeling Seth Jones might be back. Um, it's not for sure, but I think he's getting closer and closer to playing. So I would not be surprised to see him ready to go here. And I think that improves the outlooks of all of these Blue Jackets. Like, Werenski's probably going to lose his power play one job, but um, but yeah, I mean, obviously Seth Jones is a very impactful player. So 7,200 for Panarin. Um, might be a bit points chasey, and I expect his ownership to go well up after that, but I don't think it's a bad play. What is useful, I think, information for this slate, though, is that Nick Foligno replaced Pierre-Luc Dubois between Panarin and Atkinson, only at 5-on-5, though, which I think is a reason why I'm not interested in Foligno for cash games here, because after that news broke, after puck drop, really, like, I think we had mentioned that it might be possible that they would happen, but we didn't actually get confirmation of it like during morning skate, so that was a bit frustrating. Or sorry, not morning skate, pregame warmups. So Foligno is centering them, but he wasn't on the first power play. He was only on the second power play, and Dubois was still on power play 1. So I don't really think that there's much of a reason to go after Foligno because his shot rate is pretty poor. And he got a significant price jump from 4,100 to 4,900 on this slate. But it is a thing to keep in mind if you're stacking them. On the Florida end of things, I mean, they just continue to do what we expect them to do in terms of their usages. But guys like Nick Bjugstad are 6,000 now. Evgeny Dadonov and Trocheck and Barkov, they're all up among the elites of the slate price-wise. So until they start to fall back down again, I will happily fade them. I don't think that even a guy like Keith Yandle at 5,700 is much of a must play by any means. I think Yandle himself is a little bit too point dependent to be considered in this class of guys like Gostisbehere and Subban and Yossi. So I'm just patiently waiting for the prices to come back down. Even depth guys like Malgin and Vetrano are, they're not necessarily very cheap anymore. So Vetrano is 3,700. Somehow registered 8 shots on goal in only 12 minutes against the Senators. Let me just say, I don't think that's happening in a road matchup with the Columbus Blue Jackets. It might happen against the Senators, but I don't think Vetrano will have a repeat performance of that, and the minutes just simply aren't there for him. Same goes for Malgin, even. Like, yeah, he played 15 minutes while Vetrano only played 12, but I'm not that comfortable with it. If you're looking for reasons for optimism, Malgin does have 13 shots over the past 3 games, so that's alongside Trocheck and Huberdeau. Could certainly do worse, but is not really somewhere I'm looking to go. Let's go to Edmonton versus Ottawa. So Edmonton, the beneficiary of some Scott Darling goaltending, faces an Ottawa team that seems like it'll be without Erik Karlsson. If you missed that bit of news, I think, Karlsson's wife was expecting a baby and had a miscarriage, so he left the team for what I expect to be at least this game. We never know how those sort of things will resolve themselves. I think Jordan Stahl was in a similar situation earlier in the season, so I think he was out about a week. So there's really no reason to expect Carlson to play here. So obviously feel terrible for him. But what it does, I mean, it makes Ottawa just that much worse of a team. Like, geez, if you thought they were bad last year when they were conference finalists with Erik Karlsson, like this year when they're bottom dwellers without Erik Karlsson, I mean, good lord. So, McDavid is going to do McDavid things. Um, actually didn't have that big of a game despite a 7-goal outburst for the Oilers last game. I think Leon Draisaitl was the main, I guess, smash spot there. Draisaitl at 5,800 is intriguing. I don't really trust it. I can't really, I don't really have much backing to it because he did just put up an 11-point game, and the shot numbers are somewhat there, and obviously the power play won and that sort of exposure to McDavid is there. But when he's not playing with McDavid, I just really struggle to, trust him getting the sort of, I guess, not getting the same offensive looks that he was before. Like, I don't think he's capable of generating rushes like McDavid is that Draisaitl used to get his price up to this point. So let's look at the top 6 in Edmonton. It stayed pretty consistent between Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Ty Rattie alongside McDavid. So good for Ty Rattie, I guess. I mean, he's just the next beneficiary of a guy who holds a stick skating alongside McDavid. But at 4,700, that just doesn't make much sense at all. Nugent Hopkins, same sort of deal, 6,300. I think Nugent Hopkins is a very good player. And, I actually don't mind him from a daily fantasy standpoint. But 6,300 at the wing position, I mean, hell, that can get you, guys who are legitimately DFS superstars, in my opinion. I think Atkinson and Landeskog alongside McKinnon, like JVR, Hoffman, like those are just some names that I don't really expect Ryan Nugent Hopkins to outperform, even with the help of McDavid. So I don't have too big of an issue stacking McDavid with his line mates. But what was really, really nice about Tuesday night's game, though, is Darnell Nurse slotted in with the power play 1. Shockingly, so he played 27 minutes in a 7-3 blowout game, and Nurse he was a +1 with 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 block shots, and 0 shots on goal. Again, 27 minutes and power play 1 in a 7-goal game, and put up that sort of number. I find that to be a significant outlier. Nurse has shown over and over again like the ability to put up good daily fantasy numbers. So I really like Nurse at 4,400, and I don't see a reason, with Klefbom out for the year, having his shoulder surgery, I don't really see a reason that they would remove him from that power play so quickly. Ethan Bear got his chance, but was pretty ineffective. And yeah, I mean, this is Nurse's time to shine for sure. I love that he's playing alongside Adam Larson, who has been getting, the lion's share of the minutes for Edmonton outside of Klefbom when he was playing. So I have no reason to expect this, strong minutes trend to dissipate anytime soon. So Darnell Nurse at 4,400, I think, is a fantastic option. And to close out what I was discussing before, Draisaitl is centering Drake Caggiula and Pontus Aberg. So if you're looking for, that kind of a stack, I don't like it myself. I don't think Edmonton is going to beat up on Ottawa or anything. And I think it's just as likely that like the Lucic, Strome, Puljujarvi line does some of the damage or something like that. Like it's either McDavid or the guys who get direct exposure to him, in my opinion. So I think Nurse is my favorite way to target this game. On the Ottawa side, with no Karlsson, I don't think you can play Hoffman or Duchesne. Like I think they are awesome on the power play, but without Carlson, it's really hard to generate those sort of generate power plays because you have to be in the offensive zone with the puck, probably doing something rather dangerous in order to get that opportunity. And then two, it's tougher to convert with no Carlson on the ice. But the two beneficiaries of that are Thomas Chabot and Cody Ceci. Both guys check in. Let's see, Chabot's 3,500, Ceci's 3,600. They played together and played a huge role on Tuesday night. So, assuming Carlson's out, I think both of those guys make for fine defensive values as well. Cody Ceci is more of the floor guy, playing second power play and just playing a ton of minutes and always being a guy who you can count on to put up a couple shots, a couple blocks, and maybe sprinkle in a couple of extras to get you past his kind of value threshold. Like last game, he had 4 points, but it was 5 shots on goal and 3 block shots. Like that's awesome. You shouldn't expect points from him. Meanwhile, a guy like Thomas Chabot is going to step into that first power play. He's not necessarily the same sort of floor generator that Ceci has proven to be, but also played 25 minutes. So another fine option there. Let's go to Washington at Detroit. Kuznetsov is the main question mark here. It appears like he'll at least travel with the team on Thursday, so you should get an idea of their lineup on Thursday morning. Be sure to tune in to their Twitter to see how their lines shape up. But if Kuznetsov is out again, Backstrom and Ovi will likely play a huge amount of the workload. Unfortunately, Backstrom's price has really rebounded from the mid fives all the way up to 6.3 on this slate. So I don't think that's all that much in play. And Ovi at 8,000 obviously could be in a fantastic spot, but also he has to do a whole heck of a lot to get there. And with no Kuznetsov, or even with a banged up Kuznetsov or something like that, I don't know how. I'm not really sure how you're going to make your lineup work to fit in Ovi if you are, if you're trying to pay up at any of these other spots on the slate. So, Ovi's obviously always in play. And I should mention that Tom Wilson playing alongside the Backstrom Ovechkin, if Kuznetsov doesn't play again, I think this is a factor of they wanted Backstrom out against the Sagan, Ben, Radulov trio or duo for when they broke a couple of those guys apart, but they were usually skating together. So I think the huge minutes load for that Backstrom, Ovechkin, Wilson line was due to that fact. I don't think that Tom Wilson is likely to play 21 minutes again if this game ends in regulation, like Tuesday's Dallas game did. But 3,900 for a guy on the top line who could see upwards of 19 to 20 minutes. Not the worst play for 3,900. All he has to do is basically luck himself into tapping a puck to Ovechkin and hoping that he finds the back of the net with it. So I think that's a decent spot. And in these, I think, sneaky bad team matchups, I always like going to a guy like Dmitry Orlov. He just kind of lives in the same range as a lot of other defensemen who I mentioned. He's 3,700 here. So I don't think this is a slate where I'll be playing him. But he's just so talented, plays a ton of minutes. Like he's probably going to play 23 to 24 minutes. And he's out there on the power play, power play 2. But when Ovi stays out there, Orlov steps onto the ice for the last 45 seconds, and he's the guy feeding Ovechkin. So that's always a fun little thing to sweat if you play those two kind of, and just hope that Orlov feeds Ovi for that patented power play 2 Ovi spot one-timer goal. It doesn't happen often, obviously, but when it does, it's really fun to watch. And so yeah, let's go to the Detroit side. Dylan Larkin, man, if you've been doubling down every time that Larkin, if you were listening to me last week and when I was like, yeah, Dylan Larkin has like the 4th most shots of any player in the NHL over the past 10 games or whatever the stat was, where I was using to reflect the fact that Larkin has an incredible shot rate, and was just getting super duper unlucky. Well, did that ever pay off for you against Philly? The guy had 2 goals and an assist, 8 shots on goal, put up 12 and a half fantasy points. Like, man, what a night. Uh, it's only 5,200 here. So, it's one of those things, like, same with the Zibanejad. Like, if he's such a, uh, if you can trust him to put up this shot load every single game, then, I think you have to jam him in. But there's also, a very strong chance that he only sees, 2 to 3 shots on net, and Detroit just doesn't score very much. So I think it really depends on where you are in terms of your center play. Like, if you want to get up to McKinnon, I don't think I would. I mean, I have no reason to blame you. But if you're trying to live in this mid tier, I wouldn't stretch it to play. I would say to play decent players on good teams without really strong shot floors. Instead, I would look for the guys who are the focal points of their team's offense when they're on the ice, who are, similarly in that mid fives price range. Guys like Zibanejad and Larkin, even if your team is not very good, like, team strength is only so much of it for daily fantasy because you're trying to predict individuals. So Larkin just really fits the profile of a guy who, similar to Mika Zibanejad, is a fantastic DFS producer on a bad team. To illustrate that point, I mentioned Zibanejad over the last 20 games sits at a cozy 16th in the NHL in iCourse per 60. Dylan Larkin is 18th. So, there's that little symmetry between the two. I'm not sure that that's where I'm going to land on center, but those are absolutely 2 of the top center plays in my estimation, just based on their insane shot floors and what those shots lead to, namely goals and assists on rebounds and the like. So nothing else in Detroit really interests me. Like, Mantha's just, I don't know what to make of Anthony Mantha. Like, he's been playing in that top 6 and alongside Larkin a bit, but Athanasiou is kind of taken a step back as well. So I'm just going to stick it with Larkin and go on to Toronto at Nashville. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that I'm not interested in Nashville on this slate much, if at all. I think that's a little bit crazy because I think I'm kind of the guy who's like, oh man, like, paced matchups against Toronto, just jam them in. But yikes, like, this is one of the worst combinations of like really high prices on the good guys and complete lack of certainty in terms of like, how heavily relied on these individual players are going to be. Like Victor Arvidsson and Forsberg, they are combined 13,900. Like, that's just a really tough sell. And Arvidsson's minute loads over the last 5 or so games, he has 14, 21, 15, 14, 16, 14. Like, that's Mitch Marner level in terms of not being used. And because we'll mention something else, that's Mitch Marner when Austin Matthews plays levels. Like, even when Matthews is out, Marner plays more minutes than that. And Marner's kind of like the textbook definition of a guy who I love in terms of his DFS skill set, but doesn't play the minutes to really reflect such a kind of high price. So I worry about that a lot for Nashville. And you're not getting any discounts on defense either. Like Josi, Subban, Ellis are all 6,000. So I'm not really sure how you can rationally say that these guys are better plays than some of the other studs that I've mentioned. If you're looking for value, I mean, yeah, guys like Bonino and Fisher are, low threes, especially at center. So that could be an interesting punt spot. They're both not playing a huge role, but both certainly could step into, a few shifts with really good players. We've seen that a time or two from Fisher. Bonino gets a little bit of power play time here and there. But I would not bank on it unless someone was out for tonight. And any of the wings interest you? No, not really. Like Craig Smith, 5,500. The minutes, again, there are just terrible. He's averaging 14 minutes over the last 10 games. So this is kind of a stay away spot in terms of Nashville for me. On the other end, Austin Matthews appears likely to play in this one. He, on Wednesday, said himself that he was ready to go. So while he's not officially cleared to play yet, I would expect they want to get him, if he's ready, obviously, they would want to get him back in as soon as possible because they've got the playoffs to prep for, and he's been out for a while now. So if he does play, he's only 6,600. I struggle to say that I would be willing to play that, especially in cash games. But yeah, I mean, he's probably going to step in and play alongside Nylander and Hyman. And Nylander is only 4,400, again, still at the center position. So that's much cheaper than we saw Nylander at any point, at least recently, when Matthews was playing. So, if Matthews does step back, you might be able to get two really good center plays there with great correlation for much cheaper prices than you were before the injury. So that might be a worthwhile spot to just take a chance and hope that Matthews, insane talent, can go underowned in a very tough matchup, but also significantly mispriced in my estimation. Any of these other guys, I'm not that interested in. Like, I think we've reached the zenith of the Kadri Marner pricing. JVR too, like he's just way up there in price. I think they'll probably continue to fall. Especially if you were to play this matchup 10 times in a row, like Toronto at Nashville, like that's at Nashville is one of the worst spots for just team scoring in general. So I wouldn't really expect smash nights out of any of them. But I think the Matthews and Nylander, if Matthews plays, is certainly worth a look given their prices. So Vancouver at Chicago. Let's wrap up these three games before getting on out of here. Seems like Saad is definitely an afterthought on this top line. If I played Kane and Taves, I would not be stacking Saad with them. I might go with Brent Seabrook. I might go Gustafsson. I think Hinostroza will play on that top line here, which does interest me in the slightest, but just not something that I'm totally in love with, because the shot rate has definitely fallen over the last little while. And even if he does step up to this top line, I don't trust him to play, 18 to 19 minutes like a top line winger usually would. But 3,200 could make that an interesting stack. Chicago is actually a huge favorite in this game as well, minus 180. So probably to be expected with how bad the Canucks are, but definitely interesting because we also know how bad the Blackhawks are currently. So, all right. Yeah, defensively, I think Brent Seabrook is another play right in that range, 3,800, who is an option. You might have missed the 1 point that he has. He had a goal in that 5-1 loss against Colorado on that power play. But if you look at the floor numbers, they're certainly there for Seabrook. 3,800. He's got 6 blocks plus shots, 3, 5, 3. So he's not gonna, he's not likely to put up 6 to 7 fantasy points, but he could get you that floor to really push you in the right direction. And stacking him with Kane and Taves, I think makes sense. But I'm not that interested personally. Like, this game is pretty much a stay away for me. So, and on the Vancouver side, I mean, yeah, yeesh. I don't think you're playing anyone. Like, the one guy who I actually really like on Vancouver, Alex Edler, has been performing, but I mean, 5,100 on an 11 or a 10 game slate, I'm not paying that much for a Canuck in, it could be anyone really. Like, the Sedins in their prime could be 5K. And if the team was this bad, I would just say, nah, I'm good. I'll wait for I'll wait for the team to actually show me something before I start rostering them. So let's go to a playoff, I guess, extravaganza. LA at Colorado. This game has huge implications for who makes it out west, that wild card spot. It's very up for grabs. So Colorado at home. McKinnon is 8,000, but I mean, just again, look at the freaking game logs, man. Like, he's averaging 7.7 fantasy points per game over the last 10. Like, what? How? Um, like, he's doing it through shots. He's putting up a ton of goals. He's assisting on everything. Just everything McKinnon touches turns to gold right now. And a home matchup with the LA Kings does very little to scare me in that regard. Um, the only thing that should scare you is paying $8,000 for anyone. But if there's no reason to be scared of him, I guess I shouldn't say that, because I don't mean it as in I think he's a bad play. I just think that there's obviously inherent risk to paying 8,000 for anyone, because you're usually pretty much screwed if they don't get multi-point nights. Um, but as McKinnon has shown, he has the potential to go for literally double-digit shots in a night. So even without a ton of points, he can't hurt you. Uh, or there's a chance that he just won't hurt you in general. Um, I'm not paying 7,000 for Mikko Rantanen here. I don't think the spot's that good. And Mikko Rantanen, I mean, he has 17 shots over the past 10 games. Like, McKinnon has 54. So let that sink in. I'm not paying $7,000 for a Rantanen. I think, Landeskog makes a bit more sense at only 6,000. And he has a little bit better of a shot floor lately. It's really not all that much better, though. But I think he's a better option just because he's that much cheaper. And Tyson Barrie at 6,300. I mean, he's been probably the highlight of the defensive market lately. But he's now at 6,300. Didn't play alongside Erik Johnson last game. Like, Johnson played 30 minutes and Barrie was down at 24. So 24 minutes is still very fine. But, I'm not sure that in a, I guess, less close game than the Chicago game was, that Barrie gets the same sort of workload. So that's my main hesitation. Like, other than that, Barrie's averaging almost 6 fantasy points per game over the last 10, has direct correlation to McKinnon on that power play, and, probably can be expected to be one of the best defensemen here. But again, I'm more comfortable playing Shane Gostisbehere at 6,100, and I think what is just as good a matchup and definitely a higher paced one. So I think that's my thoughts there. The only guy on LA who I'm really that much interested in is Jeff Carter. DraftKings had him down at 5,400 on Tuesday night. Probably to be expected. Didn't have a great game, only put up 1 fantasy point, but he's now at 5,800. He's still on the first power play. He's still going to play, 20 minutes and double shift with Kopitar at times and run his own line, which also, too, is pretty good. So this kind of reminds me is like the Vincent Trocheck. Do you remember? Trocheck was playing second line, first power play, started about in the mid-5s, pretty good shooter, and over time, obviously, Trocheck just continued to smash over and over and over again and worked his way up to the price tag he's at now. And I think Carter has shown that in the past and probably will do it again in terms of like working his way up the price ranks. So jumping in at a time like now, I think makes sense. But with Zibanejad and Larkin actually like massively producing and still being like a lower price than Carter is, I don't think Carter's anything but a GPP play. Sorry, Boomer. And then Jake Muzzin on the first power play is something that always interests me just because he's a decent floor guy and a decent minutes guy, but hasn't been anything too exceptional as of late. So not a must play. I think saving a few hundred down to that Nurse Pollock area is a better move. Last game of the night, Vegas at San Jose. San Jose is one of my favorite teams here. Um, you know, if you're going to tell me Brent Burns is going to have a 3-point night, I'm probably going to ask you, did he hit 20? Did he hit 20 DK points? Is he just at 10? Like, no, Tuesday night, Burns had 3 assists and only had a block shot, like no shots on goal. I just don't care. But that kind of goes to show that, like, if you think San Jose is really hot right now, um, Burns picking up a point or 2 or 3 is almost always going to coincide with him putting up, 5 to 6 blocks plus shots at the minimum. So, I mean, the guy's got over 400 blocks plus shots on the season. And he's only played 73 games. Like, that is crazy. He's nearly at 6 per game on average. So I think that's just an outlier. Getting Vegas is taking the road in San Jose. So I think that just makes Burns all the better of a play. I know I'll be jamming in Burns. It feels weird just because how hot McKinnon's been, but I think Burns is actually the first player in my lineup here. Like, I just dig the matchup. I dig Brent Burns, and I'm just not going to be the one who misses out when Burns kind of snaps out of whatever he's in right now, because he's got, after a 10-shot game against Edmonton, he has 0 shots in each of the last 3 games. Those 0 shots are on a combined 19 shot attempts. Like, that's just unsustainably bad. It's going to turn around for Burns. He's still shooting the puck. He's just not getting them on net. And if history tells us anything, it tells us that even though it is harder for defensemen to get shots on goal, Brent Burns has been one of the best, too, at turning shots on goal into shots towards goal into shots on goal, because he's so good at missing shin pads. He's got such great hands at the blue line, and it's not something that concerns me. As I mentioned, he's still been shooting the puck. He just hasn't really been getting lucky. So, and not even lucky in the sense that they're going in, just lucky in the sense that they're hitting the goalie to get him shots on goal. And that's not something that I'm overly concerned about. So Burns is there. A guy who I just love is Kevin Labanc. He's one of those guys where I almost feel bad being this smitten by him, because he is 4,000 and he is only playing 13 minutes a night, but he's on the first power play. He's producing incredibly well. And if you look at the last 20 games, he's right up there with the league leaders in terms of iCorsi per 60. He's up north of 18, which is the benchmark that I use to kind of categorize as elite, great, good, league average. And that pretty much goes from about the 21 to 20 for the elites. 18 and up is what I consider to be great. 16 and up is good, and then about 14 is the league average for a DFS viable forward. Maybe not DFS viable, but a league average top 9 forward probably is what I would call it. And then anyone below that is just kind of guys who I really try to stay away from in DFS because of my emphasis on shots. But what I'm saying is that even though Kevin Labanc is pretty much locked into about 15 minutes, I love his exposure on the first power play. I love his price, and I just love his talent. He's a really nice player. And so I think that as long as he's in this power play role, that he's going to continue to put up cash-worthy nights at only 4,000. Evander Kane has dropped to 6,600. I really love him too, playing on that first power play. One of the best shot rates in the NHL. Check. Power play 1 job. Check. Brent Burns basically feeding him pucks. Check. So really, no reason to dislike Kane at only 6,600. His price has gone down just a little bit, and the shots are just pouring on. So, I think jump on Kane in this matchup is a pretty good strategy. So while we go to top stacks of the night and then guaranteed goals, I'll just start with that LeBronce, Kane, and Burns power play stack. I dig that in San Jose. All of those guys are exceptional plays on their own. And so stacking them together, saving a little bit because LeBronce knocks off the average price of Burns and Kane, who also, I don't think are that overly expensive either because they're a solid thousand less than guys like McKinnon and Kucherov and Ovi. So I just think that that's a really, really strong play. If you want another stack that I actually feel pretty good about, I'll save the Matthews and Nylander stack for if I see if Matthews is going to play. But the more I look at those prices, the more I really, really like them. I think that that's interesting, but definitely not one that I'm willing to go out there on a limb right now and say if Matthews is in, I'm jamming it because we don't know that Nylander's going to be on his wing. I would assume so, but the one I'm going to pick is the Philly line one stack of Giroux, Couturier, and Konechny. Add Gostisbehere. I think Gostisbehere is almost an obvious add to that just because he's been so great and is such a good DFS defenseman with obvious exposures to those guys. I really love the spot that Philadelphia is in. I think they'll have a strong game here. And then for guaranteed goals, I'm going to go with Dylan Larkin. I think he keeps up the strong performance that he had from last game. I think he carries on that scorer's touch, picks up a nice little 5 to 6 fantasy point night against the Capitals, and going to go significantly under-owned in my estimation. I kind of want to get frisky and go with Zibanejad, but I feel like I've kind of, I think we know how much I like Mika Zibanejad. So I'm going to go for Evander Kane as my other guaranteed goal. I know I picked him as a part of my stack, but like I said, I really dig this matchup. Kane's shot numbers are just insane, and I have no doubt about his ability to, produce against a Vegas team that I don't think is, I don't think they're all that. Against a Vegas team that with the Sabres earlier this year, he put up 9.5 fantasy points against. He had a goal, 2 on goal. I'm not going to call a 3-point night like that, but I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility either. I just love the role that Kane's playing, and that makes my guaranteed goals add up to a nice 11.6. So hopefully you guys got a little something from this solo episode. Be sure to join the GroupMe. You can DM our Twitter if you are interested in seeing that. They're joining that. And be sure to follow us on Twitter as well, at Morningscape Pod. We will have updates to the lines, to the Morningscape Madness, to just there's a lot of stuff going on our Twitter. If you like best hockey, you should be following us. I would say DJ does a pretty good job of sourcing all of the lineup notes that you need into one spot. So that's just a nice little tool to have in your back pocket, even if you're not going to join the GroupMe. So, and lastly, be sure to join the Listener League. If you're looking for an invite to that, you can DM the Twitter account as well. We can add you with your DK username to our DraftKings lobby, where we post the free Listener League pretty much every day. And the winner at the end of each month comes on the podcast, as you may have heard on Tuesday with Travis Johnson. So we're looking forward to getting the April winner on, or the March winner on in April. And obviously it's a little bit late in the season, but there might be something going on later in the year as well as a part of Listener League. So stay tuned for more information on that. Should be a fun little end to the season. Um, let's end it right there. From Doug, from DJ, and from myself. Have a good slate, everybody, and we will see ya.